All right. So, folks, one of the reasons that I have been not as interested in covering some of the conservative talking heads these days is because a lot of them seem to just kind of run out of juice and pivot into saying literally anything that might get them attention. You know, you see this with Candace Owens flirting with, the Jewish question. You see this with, um, you know, uh, Matt Walsh basically just saying whatever and reacting to TikToks. It's not that interesting. It's not too applicable to the current moment. And what I have for you today here is not applicable to the current moment, except insofar as it demonstrates exactly what I mean. You've got folks like Alex Stein who will just say whatever, like they're just completely disconnected from any kind of actual ideology because their entire premise for existing is simply to say shit that gets them attention. That's it. And no one really encapsulates this on the right quite like Benny Johnson. And Benny Johnson recently had Ron Paul on his show. Senator Ron Johnson, not Ron Paul. My bad. Sorry, Ron Paul. Ron Johnson, different Ron. And they had some really interesting thoughts about 9/11.
And I know that we're up against a hard out. Just one final question, since you brought it up. What would you like to know about September 11th, the official story there, Senator?
Well, start with Building 7. Again, I don't know that you can find structural engineers other than the ones that have the corrupt investigation inside NIST that would say that that thing didn't come down in any other way than a controlled demolition.
Can I just pause real quick and note that, one thing I don't understand about 9/11 truthers is, have you ever seen a commercial passenger jet before? Have you ever seen how big those fuckers are? Have you ever seen how fast they fly? Now imagine one of those things running full force into a building and then the fuel exploding. And I just have to say, that's pretty sufficient to me to explain why a building fell down. So, genuinely, this to me is insane. This is like seeing a meteor strike a building and just be like, well, you see, it had to have been a deep state op because that just doesn't happen. No way a meteor could break down a building. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? But anyway, I digress.
I mean, you just look at that. You talk about molten steel. Again, you listen to
They're literally doing the jet fuel can't melt steel beams, which is just not true.
Documentary Bravo 7. There's an awful lot of questions. Who ordered the removal and then destruction of all that evidence? Totally contrary to any other
evidence of what? An airplane flew into a building and the building collapsed. Evidence no longer needed. The building collapsed because a plane flew into it and exploded full force. Geez Louise, it's not that complicated. Sometimes when you throw an apple up, it comes right back down and you catch it in your hand. You don't need to throw the apple up in the air and then imagine that a miraculous swan grew out of a lake and snatched it up and took it up into the heavens, blessing it in the frozen reaches of space before dropping it down into your hands. You don't need to imagine this whole miraculous series of events or a conspiracy on the part of the swan. You can just be like, oh yeah, there's this thing called gravity. I throw the apple up and it falls back down. You don't need to come up with convoluted bullshit.
Firefighting investigation procedures. I mean, who ordered that? Who was in charge? I think there's some basic information. Where's all the documentation from the NIST investigation? No, there are a host of questions that I want, and I will be asking, quite honestly, now that my eyes have been opened up. I've talked to former Congressman Kurt Weldon now. I will work with him to expose what he's willing to expose as well.
Wow. So we may actually see hearings about this.
I think so. And by the way, this is opened up when...
You know what? Sure, why not? The Senate just uses its time and power instead of doing literally anything else to reopen decades-old conspiracy nonsense. All the while allowing 9/11 first responders to die of cancer while being bankrupted in the process because their political party stripped funding for first responders on 9/11. Yeah. These people really care about getting to the truth as long as they can fuck over 9/11 first responders in the process.
My ranking member now, when he was chairman of the Permanent Subcommittee Investigation, he did the investigation on the PGA and Live Golf and the PIF. Part of that is we had 9/11 families coming forward and saying, we want the FBI files unredacted. We want those made available in terms of what happened. What did the FBI know what happened? So we got engaged with that on a bipartisan basis. We want to get those answers, those documents for the families. Again, we didn't get squat from the FBI. So hopefully now with this administration, I think President Trump should have some interest being a New Yorker from himself. What actually happened on 9/11? What do we know? What is being covered up? My guess is there's an awful lot.
You know, oddly enough, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that even should they actually create a 9/11 Truth Commission or whatever, oddly enough, they're not going to find any links between 9/11 and Saudi Arabia. Just oddly enough, not going to be any links whatsoever. Yeah. Nope. Not even close.
In terms of what the American government knows about 9/11.
Wow, including who let the hijackers into the country, which was John Brennan, station chief in Doha. Why would he do that? And why would you let him take flight lessons? There's so many things that don't make absolutely no sense.
You know, just gonna throw this out there. Oddly enough, a lot of them came in with visas from Saudi Arabia, but you know, again, that would be really inconvenient to our geopolitical interests in Saudi Arabia.
At all.
And Donald Trump's personal finances related to Saudi Arabia.
When you actually look at the government's own documentation, this is from Guantanamo Bay. And then to your last point, and then let's please put up the senator's X account here. Everybody follow Ron Johnson. This is bombshell stuff. But yeah, President Trump on the morning.
This is bombshell stuff. No. You know, like, no. This is really, it's really not. This is actually really old conspiracy nonsense.
Morning of September 11th saying there's no way those buildings came down by themselves. They're the strongest buildings in all of New York. There's no way they came down that way. This is President.
Strongest buildings in New York never would fall down because a giant passenger jet ran into it at full force. Just real quick. Just looking, what is the kinetic force on average of a commercial plane at cruising speeds? Okay, 255 meters per second-ish. Mass of around 400,000 kilograms. Let's see. Yeah, let's convert joules to explosive tons. So...
I read that there would be horrors beyond my comprehension. I thought I was prepared, but suddenly the Benny Johnson jump scare proved I wasn't.
Okay, so like you got right 10 million joules to yeah. Okay, cool. So a plane crashing in along with all of the fuel blowing up would be sufficient to take down most buildings. Jesus Christ.
7-Eleven was an inside job. Hot coffee isn't hot enough to melt chimichangas.
Okay, but 7-Eleven should be an inside job because have any of you ever been to a Japanese 7-Eleven? It'll change your life. It'll change your life. People seem to think you need to melt the steel beam. All you need to do is weaken the steel and the whole structure collapses. Yeah, because it's like it has tons and tons and tons of material on top of it. And it's not built to like not have that weight on that one part of the steel beam. Like, I mean, like you have a plane crashing into the building. You have like the engines exploding, fuel all over the place, fire rampant, burning through different structural pieces of integrity. And then the building ultimately collapses under its own weight. I do not see how this is a difficult issue to really wrap one's head around.
This isn't Trump's own words. And it matches the words of the firefighters who were in the building, many of them who've perished. So we owe them, at the very least, these guys gave their lives. We owe them the chance to get absolution here and the truth. Thank you, Senator, for fighting for those things. God bless you and Godspeed in your pursuit of the truth. And I know.
Godspeed, Ron Johnson. I'm sure you'll get to the bottom of this whole 9/11 thing. Famously, steel needs to be hot to change its shape. Indeed. It's like a lifetime ago and we're still on this, right? For a lot of 9/11 first responders, literally it has taken their lives to get any amount of care from the government. It's disgusting. Anyway, fuck Benny Johnson, fuck Ron Johnson, and, or rather don't. And, yeah, 9/11 wasn't an inside job, folks. It was just genuinely what happens when you ram commercial airliners into two of the largest buildings on the planet.
Jet fuel might not be hot enough to melt steel, but you know what is. Jack. Respectfully, BWA.
Thank you. Doing my best with what I got.
Riverboat Jack is coming to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube and switchy streams. All that content is bursting the scenes. Politics, dating, plenty more. Your sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack